Carrots became the symbol of eye health for a reason. They contain beta-carotene, which the body can convert into vitamin A, and vitamin A does support vision. That part is true. But here's the part that often gets missed, especially after the age of 60. Relying on carrots alone can create a quiet sense of safety that is not fully earned. Because the kind of vision loss that develops later in life is usually not caused by a simple vitamin deficiency. It is driven by something slower, more structural, and much easier to overlook. My name is Dr. Warren Hung. I spend most of my time helping people understand how everyday habits interact with long-term health, especially in areas where the body does not give early warnings. Vision is one of those areas. If you find these explanations useful, consider subscribing. This channel is built to help you understand what tends to matter more as the body changes with age. Now, when people think about protecting their eyesight, they often think in terms of adding something good, a food, a supplement, a habit that feels healthy. And that approach makes sense on the surface. But the eye is not just a passive organ waiting for nutrients. It is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the body. It depends on a steady supply of oxygen, stable blood flow, and a delicate balance between damage and repair. And that balance changes over time. When you are younger, the system has more reserve. The small blood vessels that feed the retina are flexible. The cells that process light can recover more easily from daily stress. Oxidative damage still happens, but the body keeps up with it more effectively. After 55 or 60, that margin becomes smaller. Blood vessels can stiffen, circulation can slow, the ability to neutralize oxidative stress gradually declines. And the retina, which is the thin layer of tissue at the back of the eye that captures light and sends signals to the brain, becomes more vulnerable to cumulative damage. This is where the misunderstanding around carrots becomes important. Because eating a food that supports one part of the system does not necessarily protect the system as a whole. Vitamin A deficiency can cause vision problems, but in developed settings, true deficiency is relatively uncommon. What becomes more common with age is a different pattern entirely. Damage that builds quietly. Stress that accumulates without obvious symptoms. Changes in circulation that are not felt directly, but affect how well the eye is nourished. This is why some people say, "I've eaten well for years, and my vision still declined." They are not wrong. They are often doing something beneficial, but they may be addressing only one layer of a much more complex system. And this is also where false reassurance begins to take hold. Because vision does not usually decline all at once, it changes gradually. Maybe a little more light is needed to read. Maybe contrast feels slightly reduced. Maybe driving at night becomes more uncomfortable. These changes are often explained away as just aging. And sometimes they are. But sometimes they are also early signals that the underlying support system of the eye is under strain. Another point that is easy to miss is that the eye depends heavily on microcirculation. That means very small blood vessels delivering oxygen and nutrients to very sensitive tissue. If those vessels are not functioning well, even a diet that looks healthy on paper may not translate into effective support at the tissue level. This becomes especially relevant for people with conditions like high blood pressure, elevated blood sugar, or cholesterol imbalances. These conditions affect blood vessels throughout the body, including the tiny ones in the eyes. And yet, it is common for someone to focus on adding a specific food, like carrots, while the underlying circulation issue remains unaddressed. So the question shifts. Not, are you eating something good for your eyes? But is your eye actually receiving what it needs, and is it protected from the types of damage that become more common with age? That is a different question entirely. And it leads to a different kind of answer. Because when we look at what drives long-term eye health, three factors show up repeatedly in both clinical observation and research. First, oxidative stress. This is a process where unstable molecules, often called free radicals, gradually damage cells. The retina is particularly sensitive to this because of its high energy demand and constant exposure to light. Second, inflammation. Low-grade, ongoing inflammation can affect the function of retinal cells and the supporting structures around them. Third, circulation. If blood flow is reduced or inconsistent, the delivery of oxygen and nutrients becomes less reliable, and waste removal becomes less efficient. These are not abstract concepts. They are active processes happening in the background, often without clear symptoms in the early stages. And this is why a single food, even a healthy one, rarely addresses the full picture. Now, this does not mean carrots are harmful. They are not. They can be part of a balanced diet. But the idea that they are enough to protect vision, especially later in life, is where the misunderstanding lies. Because protection at this stage is less about one nutrient and more about how multiple systems are supported together. This includes how well the body manages oxidative stress, how stable inflammation levels are, how effectively blood reaches the retina, how resilient the tissue remains under daily strain. When those factors are not aligned, changes can begin long before they are obvious. And one of the challenges is that the absence of symptoms often feels like reassurance. If you can still see clearly, it is natural to assume everything is functioning as it should. But the eye, like many parts of the body, can compensate for quite a while before noticeable decline appears. So, by the time changes are obvious, the underlying processes may have been developing for years. This is not meant to create worry, it is meant to bring clarity. Because when you understand what is actually driving the changes, you can focus on what truly makes a difference. And this is where the conversation starts to shift, away from the idea of a single, good food, toward understanding which mechanisms need support, and how that support can be provided in a way that actually reaches the tissue that matters. There is one category of compounds, found in certain spices, that has been studied for its role in reducing oxidative stress, supporting circulation, and helping regulate inflammation at the same time. And that combination is what makes it relevant to vision, in a way that a single vitamin often is not. But before that makes sense, it helps to see clearly what is actually putting pressure on the system in the first place, and why those pressures are so often missed. When vision begins to change later in life, the cause is rarely a single event. It is usually the result of small stresses adding up over time, often in ways that do not feel noticeable day to day. One of the most important of these is oxidative stress. This is a normal process. The body produces energy, and as a byproduct, it also produces unstable molecules that can damage cells. Under healthy conditions, the body has systems to neutralize these molecules. But those systems are not unlimited. As the years pass, especially after 60, the balance can shift. The retina is particularly exposed to this problem. It is constantly active. It uses a high amount of oxygen. It is also exposed to light, which increases the production of these reactive molecules. So even if nothing feels wrong, there is a steady background pressure on the cells responsible for vision. Now add another layer, circulation. The retina depends on a network of very small blood vessels. These vessels deliver oxygen and nutrients and remove waste products. When they function well, the system stays stable. When they begin to lose flexibility or efficiency, the entire environment of the eye changes. This is where conditions like high blood pressure, elevated blood sugar, and cholesterol begin to matter more than people expect. Because they do not just affect the heart or large arteries, they affect the smallest vessels first. In the eyes, that means less consistent delivery of oxygen, less efficient removal of waste, more stress on already sensitive cells. And this does not always produce immediate symptoms. That is part of the problem. A person may feel fine. Their central vision may still be clear. They may pass a basic eye test. And yet, at the microscopic level, the system may already be under strain. I remember a patient in his early 70s who told me he was not concerned about his eyesight because he ate what he considered a very eye-friendly diet. He included carrots regularly, along with other vegetables. He had no pain, no obvious vision loss, and he felt reassured by that. But when we looked more closely, there were early signs of reduced circulation in the small vessels of the retina. Nothing dramatic, nothing that had affected his daily life yet, but enough to indicate that the environment those cells depended on was beginning to change. And this illustrates something important about how the system actually behaves. The body does not always signal early damage in a way that feels urgent. Instead, it adapts. Cells compensate. Other pathways pick up the slack. Vision remains good enough. And because of that, the underlying issue can continue without being addressed. This is what makes vision decline different from something like pain. Pain demands attention. It interrupts your day. It pushes you to act. Vision changes, especially early ones, are often subtle. They blend into normal life. A little more light here, a little more strain there. Slight difficulty with contrast or night driving. Each change is small on its own. But together, they reflect a system that is gradually losing efficiency. Another factor that plays a role is low-grade inflammation. This is not the kind of inflammation you feel with an injury. It is quieter. It operates in the background. But over time, it can affect how cells function and how tissues repair themselves. In the eye, inflammation can interfere with the normal maintenance of retinal cells and the supporting structures around them. And again, this tends to increase with age. The body's regulatory systems are still working, but they are not as responsive as they once were. Recovery from stress takes longer. Small imbalances persist more easily. So now you have three processes interacting: oxidative stress, circulatory changes, low-grade inflammation. Each one on its own may not cause immediate problems, but together they create an environment where damage accumulates faster than it is repaired. This is where many well-intentioned habits fall short. Because they are built around the idea of adding something beneficial, without addressing the processes that are actively creating stress. For example, someone may focus on including certain vegetables or supplements, but still have poor sleep, high levels of daily stress, uncontrolled blood pressure, elevated blood sugar, limited physical activity. Each of these factors influences the same systems that affect the eyes. And this is why the results can feel confusing. A person may think, "I'm doing the right things," and in some ways they are. But if the underlying drivers are still present, the net effect may still be negative. There is also a common assumption that if vision problems were developing, they would be obvious early on. That assumption is not always reliable. Many conditions that affect the retina, including age-related macular degeneration, can begin without clear symptoms. Changes may first appear in areas of vision that are not immediately noticed, or in ways that are easy to adapt to. By the time central vision is affected, the process may have been underway for quite some time. This is why early understanding matters. Not to create concern, but to shift attention to what is actually influencing the system. Another detail that is often overlooked is how sensitive the retina is to fluctuations. It does not only depend on what is delivered, but also on how consistently it is delivered. Sudden changes in blood sugar, for example, can affect the small vessels and the environment around retinal cells. Over time, repeated fluctuations can contribute to stress in the system. Similarly, spikes in blood pressure can strain the vascular network that supports the eye. These are not always felt directly, but they leave an impact. So when we talk about protecting vision, especially after 60, it is not just about adding supportive nutrients. It is about reducing the sources of ongoing stress. And this is where a shift in thinking becomes important. Instead of asking, "What should I eat for my eyes?" a more useful question is, "What processes are putting pressure on my eyes, and how do I support the system that keeps them stable?" That shift opens the door to solutions that work at the level where the problem actually exists. Because if oxidative stress is high, supporting antioxidant systems matters. If inflammation is elevated, calming that process matters. If circulation is reduced, improving blood flow matters. And when you find something that can influence more than one of these at the same time, it becomes much more relevant. This is where certain compounds found in spices begin to stand out. Not because they are a quick fix, but because they interact with the same processes that are driving the problem. They do not replace the need to manage blood pressure or blood sugar. They do not undo years of accumulated stress overnight. But they can support the environment in which the eye is functioning. And that is often where meaningful protection begins. And this is where it becomes useful to look closely at one specific spice that has been studied for how it affects these underlying processes, especially in the context of aging eyes. When people hear that a spice may help repair the eyes, it is easy to imagine something dramatic, a quick reversal, a visible change in vision. That is not how this works. So before naming it, it is important to set the expectation correctly. Repair, in this context, does not mean restoring vision overnight. It means supporting the systems that allow the eye to protect itself, maintain its structure, and slow the processes that lead to decline. The spice that has drawn attention in this area is turmeric, specifically its active compound called curcumin. Curcumin has been studied for its effects on three of the same processes we discussed earlier: oxidative stress, inflammation, circulation. And what makes it relevant is not that it targets only one of these, but that it interacts with all three. Let's take them one at a time, in a way that connects directly to how the eye works. First, oxidative stress. The retina is constantly exposed to light and high oxygen activity. This makes it one of the most vulnerable tissues to oxidative damage. Over time, that damage can affect the cells responsible for capturing and processing visual information. Curcumin has been studied for its antioxidant properties. In simple terms, it helps neutralize some of the unstable molecules that contribute to cellular damage. In laboratory and animal studies, curcumin has shown the ability to reduce oxidative stress in retinal cells. Human data is more limited, but there is growing interest in how this mechanism may support long-term eye health. This does not mean it repairs damage directly, but it can help reduce the rate at which new damage accumulates. Second, inflammation. Low-grade inflammation is one of the quiet drivers of many age-related conditions, including those affecting the eyes. Curcumin has been widely studied for its anti-inflammatory effects. It interacts with signaling pathways in the body that regulate inflammation, helping to bring those levels down when they are elevated. In the context of the eye, this matters because inflammation can interfere with how retinal cells function and how they recover from stress. Reducing that background inflammation helps create a more stable environment. Again, not a quick fix, but a shift in the conditions the cells are operating in. Third, circulation. This is often the least discussed, but one of the most important factors. The retina depends on consistent blood flow through very small vessels. If that flow is reduced or irregular, the supply of oxygen and nutrients becomes less reliable. Some studies suggest that curcumin may support vascular function, helping blood vessels respond more effectively. This includes improving endothelial function, which is a way of describing how well the inner lining of blood vessels regulates flow. For the eye, even small improvements in this area can be meaningful, because the margin for error is already narrow. Now, it is important to pause here and correct another possible misunderstanding. Curcumin is not a replacement for managing blood pressure, blood sugar, or cholesterol. If those are not controlled, they will continue to affect the same systems we are trying to support. Think of curcumin as something that can assist the environment, not override it. There is also the question of evidence. Curcumin has been studied extensively in general health contexts, particularly for inflammation and oxidative stress. In eye-specific research, the evidence is still developing. Some small human studies and observational data suggest potential benefits in conditions like age-related macular degeneration and diabetic retinopathy, but the results are not uniform, and larger trials are still needed. So the responsible way to understand this is, there is a strong biological rationale. There is supportive early evidence, but it is not a guaranteed outcome. That distinction matters. Another practical point is absorption. Curcumin, on its own, is not absorbed very efficiently by the body. This is why many formulations include piperine, a compound found in black pepper, which can significantly increase absorption. Without that, much of the curcumin may pass through the system without being fully utilized. This is one of those details that often gets overlooked when people try to apply what they hear. They may add turmeric to their food, which is still beneficial as part of a balanced diet, but the concentration and absorption may not reach the levels studied in research. So there is a difference between culinary use and therapeutic use. Both have value, but they are not the same. There are also safety considerations. Curcumin is generally well tolerated, but in higher doses, it can interact with certain medications, including blood thinners. It can also affect gallbladder function in some individuals. So for someone taking medication or managing a medical condition, it is reasonable to discuss it with a healthcare provider before making changes. Now, stepping back, the reason this spice becomes relevant is not because it is unique in isolation. It is because it touches multiple systems that are involved in eye health at the same time. Most single nutrients target one pathway. Curcumin interacts with several, and that is what aligns it more closely with the way vision decline actually develops, which is rarely driven by a single cause. But there is one more important layer to understand. Even if a compound supports the right processes, it still needs to be part of a broader approach. Because the body does not operate in isolated pathways, the same circulation that feeds the eyes also feeds the brain. The same inflammatory signals that affect the retina also affect blood vessels throughout the body. The same oxidative stress that impacts vision is also involved in heart disease and other age-related conditions. So when you support these systems, you are not only supporting your eyes, you are supporting a larger network. And this is where the real value begins to show, not as a single solution, but as part of a coordinated effort to reduce stress on the system and improve how it functions over time. But knowing that a spice can help is only part of the picture, because how it is used, what it is combined with, and what mistakes are avoided will determine whether it actually makes a meaningful difference. Knowing that curcumin can support the eye is useful, but what matters more is how that knowledge is applied in real life. Because this is where many people unintentionally lose the benefit. They hear about a helpful compound, add a small amount to their routine, and assume the job is done. Meanwhile, the underlying pressures on the system continue. So this final part is about turning everything into something practical, realistic, and medically responsible. Let's start with how to use it. Curcumin can be included in two main ways: through food, or through a standardized supplement. Using turmeric in food is a good habit. It contributes to overall dietary quality and provides small amounts of curcumin along with other beneficial compounds. But if the goal is to reach levels similar to those studied in research, supplementation is often what is used. And this is where one detail becomes important again: absorption. Curcumin by itself is not easily absorbed, so when supplements are used, they are often combined with piperine, the compound from black pepper, or formulated in a way that improves bioavailability. Without that, the actual amount reaching the bloodstream may be quite low. Now, this does not mean more is always better. Typical studied doses vary, but many fall in the range of 500 to 1,000 milligrams of curcumin per day, often divided into smaller doses. That said, the exact amount should not be guessed, especially if you are taking medications, because curcumin can interact with blood thinners, certain diabetes medications, and drugs that affect liver metabolism. So this is one of those situations where a short conversation with a healthcare provider can prevent unintended problems. Now, beyond dosage, timing and consistency matter. Curcumin is not something that produces immediate changes in how you see. Its effect, when it occurs, is gradual. It works by influencing the environment in which cells operate. That means consistency over time is more relevant than occasional use. And it also means expectations need to be realistic. This is not about restoring vision that has already been significantly lost. It is about supporting the system so that further decline is slower and the tissue is better protected. Now this leads to a more important point. Curcumin can support the system, but it cannot compensate for ongoing stress that is not addressed. So if someone adds curcumin but still has poorly controlled blood pressure, frequent blood sugar spikes, chronic sleep disruption, high levels of daily stress, very low physical activity, then the net effect may be limited, because the same processes we discussed earlier will continue to operate. This is why it helps to think in terms of a simple framework. Not a long list of instructions, but a few key areas that work together. First, circulation support. This means keeping blood pressure within a healthy range, staying physically active, and avoiding long periods of inactivity. Even regular walking can improve vascular function, which directly affects how well the eyes are supplied. Second, oxidative stress balance. This includes not only curcumin, but also a diet that provides a range of antioxidants. Leafy greens, berries, and other colorful vegetables contribute to this. The goal is not one superfood, but a consistent pattern. Third, inflammation control. This overlaps with both diet and lifestyle. Sleep plays a role here. So does body weight. So does overall metabolic health. Low-grade inflammation is often not felt, but it responds to these factors. Fourth, stability. This is the one many people overlook. The body responds better to steady conditions than to frequent swings. Stable blood sugar, stable blood pressure, regular sleep patterns. These create an environment where the eye is under less stress. When these four areas are reasonably aligned, something like curcumin becomes more meaningful, because it is supporting a system that is already being protected from multiple directions. Now, there is another point that is worth addressing, especially for people over 60. Many assume that once vision starts to change, there is little that can be done beyond corrective lenses. Lenses help with focus. They do not address the underlying tissue. And while it is true that not all changes can be reversed, the rate of progression and the quality of the environment in the eye can still be influenced. This is where early attention makes a difference. Not when vision is already significantly impaired, but when the system is still adapting. Even small improvements in circulation, inflammation, and oxidative balance can have a larger impact at that stage. Another practical step is regular eye evaluation, not just for vision clarity, but for retinal health. Because some changes are only visible during examination, not through symptoms. This helps catch patterns earlier, when there is more room to respond. And this connects back to something we discussed at the beginning. The absence of symptoms is not always reassurance. Feeling that your vision is fine does not always mean the underlying system is fully stable. So, the goal is not to wait for a problem. It is to understand what tends to create problems and reduce that pressure over time. If you take everything we discussed and simplify it into a daily approach, it would look something like this. Keep movement regular to support circulation. Eat in a way that reduces oxidative stress over time. Maintain stable routines to avoid unnecessary strain. Use supportive compounds like curcumin consistently and appropriately. Monitor health markers that affect small vessels, especially blood pressure and blood sugar. This is not complicated, but it does require consistency. And that consistency is what creates the difference over years, not days. Before we finish, I want to leave you with one grounded thought. Vision decline is often treated as something that simply happens with age, but in many cases, it reflects how well a set of systems has been supported over time. When those systems are understood, the situation becomes less mysterious and more manageable. If this helped clarify something for you, you may find value in the other explanations on this channel. They are all built around helping you understand what quietly matters as the body changes. And I'm curious, was there a part of this that made you rethink something you've been doing or something you assumed was enough? That kind of awareness is often where meaningful change begins.